Okay, so hello and welcome back. My name is Abhilash and you are watching Selenium Express, and today we are going to start with a new concept called Spring MVC form validation. This is not a Spring MVC concept. Even if you are working with Spring Boot, even if you are working with any web application in Java, the same concept you need to implement there also. So the form validation is a really important concept. That's because in any web application we'll have form and we need to validate our form, correct? So even if you are working with a Spring MVC application or a Spring Boot web application, this particular concept matters a lot. So that's why the validation plays a really vital role whenever it comes to the real-time application. That's because the company that you are working with has a different criteria, and we should know that how to implement all those things right here in our application. Okay, one more thing, this topic is really important for the interview purpose. You know the reason, right? We are using this concept pretty much in our real-time application, so obviously in the interview also they are going to ask you a lot of questions from this topic. Okay, so before we go ahead, this is the content that I'm going to cover in this particular video. First, I'm going to give you the introduction to this topic. Then I'll tell you why we need the server-side validation with a real-time example. If you feel you already know about it, you can skip this section. Once we complete that, we will understand what do you mean by JSR and JCP. And once we understand that, I'm going to give you an introduction to the bean validation API. Once we are done with that, we are going to do a lot of hands-on with the bean validation. And at last, we are going to design the term and condition checkbox for our home page. And we will restrict the user if he is not checking the term and condition checkbox. Okay, so this is going to be my foundation tutorial on the form validation. In the next video, we are going to understand a lot of advanced stuff, but I think the foundation is important. So feel free to skip any section that you already know, and you will get a video map to all this topic in the description below. So I will just give you a quick introduction to this topic right now, and after that I'll just dive you through this topic step by step, and we are going to start everything from scratch. So be with me till the end of this video, and I am going to start everything from scratch. Before that, here is a quick introduction to this topic. Okay, so right now let's imagine that this is your computer and this is me sitting with my computer, and you have created a website, let's say using Spring MVC or Spring Boot, and you have deployed your website in Tomcat. Right now you asked me, let's say I'm the user, and you asked me that, hey, could you please connect to my website? Then I said obviously, but could you please give me your URL? So you have shared the IP address of your computer and the port number and the website name. So I just sent a request to your website and I got a form back in return. So now let's say I got this form when I did ping to your website. So now the first question, if I'm going to ask you that how you have created this particular form, then simply the answer will be you would have used HTML, CSS and JavaScript. So I got this form and you have built this form using HTML, CSS, JavaScript, which are called the client-side programming languages. So the first question will be why I'm calling these languages are client-side. This is client-side, that's because I am the client. The user is the client, right? Or you can say the web browser is your client. So the web browser is going to invoke all these languages, and it can run the script and can load this particular form in your computer screen. So that's why we call the web browser, just like Mozilla Firefox or the Google Chrome, as the client, right? Right now, let's imagine that the client has entered the username and the email address, and he did enter the submit button. Now what will happen? Now obviously we understand about the query string in the last episode. So we will get the query string as name equal to Vilas, email equal to whatever the user entered as a query string, and obviously the client will send these things to the server side or to the backend of this application. Now inside the backend or inside the server, you have written code to handle this particular URL or the query string. So you have written code in Java, let's say, and Java is a server-side programming language. So the next thing will be you are going to handle this query string, or you are going to handle this URL, and you are going to convert these entries to a Java object, just like name equal to Avilash and email equal to avilash@gmail.com. And once you converted the URL to a Java object, you are going to send this object to the database, and you are going to save this object inside the database, isn't it? So now the interesting thing is, before you are going to save this object inside the database, you have to validate the data that you have captured from the URL. Are these data are valid? Just have a look here. The name equal to Abhilash. A starts with a small letter. What if I have a business rule? What if I have a business criteria which says that, hey, do not enter any name which starts from a lowercase? What if I have a business criteria which says that, hey, do not receive any Gmail domain URL? We will only accept the URL ending with @seleniumexpress.com. So obviously at that time we should not store this object inside your database. We should not persist this particular object, isn't it? We need to validate this particular object. We need to validate this particular bean. The beans are also called as objects, and the objects are created from classes. Which class I'm talking about right here? So if you have watched my last episode, you would have surely understand this particular concept. So this is my form, and the back end of this particular form, the way that I'm storing the user's data entered inside these text boxes by creating a DTO class. So basically whatever the user is entering right here, I'm storing those data, or I'm mapping those data, or I'm binding those data inside this DTO properties, isn't it? So the question is, before I map the user entered data inside my DTO class properties, I need to make sure whether the data are valid, whether the name that the user entering is a valid name, whether the email entered by the user is a valid email. And if the user entered data are not valid, then I need to tell the user that, hey, you cannot submit this particular form because the name that you have entered is invalid, because the email that you have entered is invalid. Please enter a valid email. Correct? And this is what we call a form validation. Okay, so we are validating the form, so we are calling it a form validation. And if you see the previous slide here, so here we are validating this class, or here we are validating this bean, right? So before the object is going to get stored in a database, or before we do some work with the bean, we need to validate the bean, and we have to make sure that the user entered data are correct, right? So that's why we need to define the validation constraint for these particular properties, and we call it a bean validation. Cool. So right now, here is the question. We know CSS, HTML, and JavaScript, these are the client-side programming languages, and JSP, Servlet, Java, these are the server-side programming languages. And I'm damn sure that if you have a little bit of understanding with HTML and JavaScript, then you must be knowing that we can do the form validation inside the client side itself. It's not a big deal. So right now the question is, why we need to perform the bean validation or the form validation inside the server side? It's a valid question, isn't it? So if we can do validation in the client side easily, then why we need the server side validation? And that's what is coming next. But before that, let me give you a quick walkthrough that why we need the server side validation and what will happen if we'll only rely on the client side validation. What's the real-time problem that we're going to have? Let's have a deep dive. Okay, so right now let's see what is the problem that we are going to have if we only depends on the client side validation. I'm not saying that client side validation is bad, but I'm going to tell you right here that what is the problem that we're going to have if we're going to use the client side validation. Okay, so always remember that we need the client side validation and the server side validation together. We need to have the client side validation in our front end code. We also need to have the server side validation code in our server side. Okay, so right now Let's only do some client-side validation in our front-end code, and let's see what is the problem that we're going to face if we are only going to rely on the client-side validation. So right now, let me go to my application. Okay, so this is our Love Calculator homepage, and in this application we have username and cross name, label and text boxes right here. Okay, so for now let me delete this default values. I don't need it right now. I was just having it right here just because I was teaching you data binding, but right now I know you guys are pretty good in data binding, so let me remove this particular things. So where from these values are coming? First of all, probably I have initialized their properties inside the DTO that this particular page is using. So this is my home page, right? So who is actually loading my home page? So if I'll go to source main Java, I'll go to the controllers and I'll go to the LC app controller right here. So here we can see this is my slash request mapping. So if you can see here in this particular page, we have the slash mapping right here. So this is actually the method which is getting called, and you can see this is actually calling my home page. So if I'll do Command Shift R right here, I can go to my home page, right? So this is the page that we are seeing right here. So right now what I can do here, I can go to my LC app controller, and this is actually the DTO object that I'm trying to create before I load my home page, and I'm also sending this DTO object to my home page. So during the object creation, whatever the value this particular DTO is containing, that particular values are going to my home page, and by default I'm getting those values while this particular home page is getting loaded. So what I'll do right now, I'll go to my user info DTO, and here is my username and cross name, Mr. X and Miss Y. These values are getting loaded right here. So let me simply remove these values right now. I do not need it because we are done with the data binding concept, and I know you are pretty much aware about it. Cool. So right now, if you can see, my changes are getting reloaded right here. So it's completed right now. So right now, if I'm going to refresh this particular page, these values are disappear, right? Okay. So right now, what I need to do here is in this home page, I'm going to have some validation for the your name text box and for the cross name text box as well. So first of all, let's say I want to have some validation rule for my your name text box. Okay, so what is the validation rule that I want to apply to my your name and the cross name text box? Let's say right now, if I am giving some value for my your name, let's say Sheldon and Amy right here, and I'm hitting calculate, things should work fine, and I'm getting username is Sheldon and cross name is Amy. But right now, if I'll not provide any value right here, if I'll delete it, and if I'll delete it, and if I'm going to do calculate, still I'm moving to the next page and it's showing my username is blank and the cross name is blank because I have not entered anything right here. So what is the thing that I want to do right now? I want to restrict the user. If these text boxes are empty and if somebody is hitting calculate, I want to give them some validation error without moving them to the next page. Okay, so first of all, let's say I do not know Spring Framework. I only know HTML, CSS, and I know a little bit of JavaScript. I know that you guys should have some kind of knowledge with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It doesn't matter that you are a full stack developer or not. We should know the basics of it. So if I go to the Love Calculator homepage, which is this one, homepage.jsp. Okay, so for now, if you see here, this p tag and p tag, inside that we have a label called your name, and inside that we have a form input, right? What is this type equal to text doing here? It's not needed. Let me remove it, and let me remove it for the cross name also. For the form input tag, we do not need a type because form input does mean that we are actually needing a text field. Okay, cool. So right now we have our your name and the cross name field right here. Let's say for now I want to have a validation for the your name text box. So I want to have a validation for this, and what I want here that if my your name is empty, if the your name is blank, let's say if there is not at least one character is there inside this particular text box, then we will restrict the user to submit the form, and we will give him some validation error that, hey, this particular field, this particular text box is needed. You cannot leave it blank, and you have to enter at least one character for this particular text box. So the way that I'm going to achieve this right here, without using the Spring MVC, without coding anything in Java, by using some JavaScript, I'm going to show you something right here. Let me minimize this, okay, and let me open up a browser. Let me drag this to here, and let me hit the same URL. Let me copy this URL, and let me paste this URL, and I'll do go, and I get my page right here. So let's say you can see this is my form. My form ends here and my form starts here, right? This is my form, and inside this particular form I do have two text boxes and one submit button. So here, if I can do something like this, let's say I will use the attribute called on submit, and if I'll give the value for on submit is false, see what is going to happen. If I'm going to enter something right here, enter something right here, and do calculate, okay, it's moving to the next page, no problem. So what I can do here, I can write here return false, command S. Now let me refresh this particular page, and let me enter something right here, enter something right here, and do calculate. Okay, still it's going to the next page because I have a typo here. So let me correct the typo. Let me write false. If I'm going to enter some data right here, if I'm going to enter some data right here, if I do calculate, now see, I am not moving to the next page. If this on submit is returning me a false attribute, I am not able to submit the form, correct? And if this value will be true, let me do command S, and let me refresh this particular page, enter something right here, and do calculate, I'm able to move to the next page. So I have to write a JavaScript function which is going to return either a true or a false value, right? So I have to write a function here, let's say validate username. So the intention over here is that I'm going to write a JavaScript function called validate username, and that particular function is going to read the user input from this particular box and going to tell me that whether there is some input provided by the user or not. If the input has been provided by the user and this particular box is not empty, and let's say if there is at least one character entered by the user for this box, then I am going to allow the user to go to the next form when he hit calculate, when he submits the particular form. Okay, so now let me write a function here called validate username. Let me copy this. Now let me go to the head tag. So here my head start, here my head end. So I'll do one thing. After the title, let me give some white spaces, and I'll do what here? I'll write script, because I want to write a JavaScript function. Doesn't matter you know JavaScript or not, doesn't matter. I'm going to write a very simple JavaScript function here, and it's not needed. If you understand it, it's fine. If you don't understand it, that's also fine. But I'm damn sure that you are going to understand it, right? It's pretty simple, man. You are coding in Java and you are not going to understand JavaScript. How is that possible? You know one language means you know all the language. That's how I think. All are syntax, right? So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to create a function. So this is going to be my function name, right? Validate username, as we have seen right there. Validate username. And I'm going to use a keyword here called function. So this is a JavaScript way to create a function. I'm going to open and close the parenthesis, and I am going to have a curly brace. Cool. So right now my intention here is that from the username, I'm going to fetch the data first. I'm going to fetch the data, what is been entered right here in this box, and then I am going to validate it. So how to fetch the data from this particular text box? Okay, let me go to my Google Chrome right here. I have told you already about the developer tool. So I'll click on the developer tools here. So let's say this is my home page. Right now I'll go to the console right here. So let's say I have some value here inside the your name text box. Let's say Abhilash. And what I'm going to do here, I will write something called document, okay, dot get element by id. So what is the element id for the your name text box? If you forget it, click on the elements tab right here, click on this little arrow mark right here and go to that particular field and click here. Now you can see the id for the username or the your name text box is yn, right? So I'm going to copy this id, command C, I'm going to the console tab and I'm going to do what? I am going to put here command V, right? So document.getElement by id, and let me hit enter here. Okay, so observe the output right here. So we get the complete HTML for the your name text box. So right now I do not want the HTML, I want the value from it. So I'll write document again and I'll write get element by id and I'll provide the id. In my case this is yn, and I'll do dot and I'll write value here. Now let's see what I'm getting here. So I'm getting Avilas, what I have entered here, correct? Now let's say I want to write Avilas dot panigrahi. So let me run the same command right here again and let's check that I am getting whatever I have entered here or not. So I'll write enter and there you go, Avilas dot panigrahi. If you're writing anything right here and if you're going to run the JavaScript command, we're going to get the same value whatever you have entered in the text box. So I want this line of code and that's it. So I'll go back to my STS and the function that I'm trying to create here, where is that? Validate username. So here I'm going to paste that line of code, okay, and I'm going to store that particular value, whatever the value I'm getting by this particular line, I'm going to store it with a variable called username or your name, whatever you want to write, doesn't matter. And how to declare a variable in JavaScript by using the var keyword, okay, and that's it, you get your username. Now tell me, I want to check whether the username is greater than one character or not, and for that what you will do it in Java, how you are going to find out that how many characters are there inside this particular string. Obviously you are going to use length function, right? And here also I'm going to use something similar, username, which is my value, whatever I'm getting from this, then dot length. Cool. So this is actually going to give me the length of the username. So what I can do here, I can put this inside a if clause and I'll wrap this off with a parenthesis. I'll open and close this and I'll say here, let's say if the length is lesser than 2 character or 1 character, okay, let me say if the length is lesser than 2, then let me return false here, right? You know, right, if I'm returning false, this onSubmit method will be also returning false. If it is returning false, the user will not be able to hit the calculate button. I mean, if he is hitting the calculate button, he will not be allowed to go to the next page. So I'll be returning false here, else I will return true here. That's it, you are done. Okay, so now let's say if the username is less than 2 character, I'm going to have an alert here. Let's say alert, your name field or your name should have at least 1 characters. Okay, let me do command S. So now let me do what? Let me go to my Google Chrome and let me go back. Let me refresh this particular page so that it will be reloaded. And right now, let's say I'm not filling in any details for the your name, and let's say I'm hitting something for the cross name and I'm doing calculate. See what I got here. Your name should have at least 1 character. So if you are not filling in this your name, we are getting a validation here, right? That hey, you should have 1 character, right? You cannot leave it blank. Let's say I'm giving here 1 character and to calculate, and still it's saying we should have at least 1 character. That's because probably I made it 2. Let's say 1. Okay, let me do command S right here again and let me refresh the page. So let me provide 1 character to this and let me say for the cross name is something, I'll do calculate, and I'm able to move to the next page. So here my validation is successful. So if I'm not giving at least one character to this your name field, and if I'm hitting calculate, I'm getting a validation here that hey, you cannot make it blank. And this is JavaScript, right? This is a client-side validation. So now you may question me, okay, if the client-side validation is working good with JavaScript, then why we need a server-side validation, correct? But I told you previously, we need both client-side and the server-side validation. Only client-side validation is not enough. Now the absolute question from you is right now, why so? It's working good. My JavaScript is working good. So right now, I'm going to show you some funny thing right here. So guys, as a developer, if you know some kind of web designing, you can actually edit the HTML on the fly, right? You can change the HTML that I have written for this particular page. And also, you can tell your browser, let's say I'm using Google Chrome right now. You can tell my Google Chrome that, hey, do not run the JavaScript. Do not allow the site to run the JavaScript. At that time, what is going to happen? That time, my validation that I have written in JavaScript will not work. At that time, you need some kind of validation in your server-side code. Okay, I'll show you how. Okay, now let's see here. If I'm entering at least one character right here, I'm able to go to the next page. If I'm not entering anything, I'm getting a validation error. Cool. Now let me break it. Okay. So what I'm going to do here, I'll go to the element section here, and I'll find the element for the your name text box. And see here, we're capturing the thing. We're capturing the data from the your name is by using the ID, right? So if you see in my STS, I'm using document.getElement by ID, correct? Right now, if I'm going to remove this ID, let me delete this ID from here, and I'll do enter. So right now actually I have edited my HTML on the fly. Okay, now see what is going to happen. I'm not providing anything right here. I'm providing my cross name, calculate, and boom, I'm able to go to the next page. So here my validation break. Because I have just edited my HTML code on the fly. Okay, I have just removed the ID. So right now, if you will not write any kind of validation code in your server side, this is going to be an absolute disaster, and of course your business logic will break. Okay, might be there is another question from you. What about if the user is not smart? If the user cannot edit the HTML code just like you did, then the user just simply can go to the console tab. He can click on the setting. JavaScript, can I type here? No. Okay, so let me go to the console again. And I think here we can, yeah, there you go, run command, right? He can click here and he can click JavaScript here. And can you see here, disable JavaScript? So if I'm going to disable the JavaScript, then my browser will not allow the site to run the JavaScript code. You want to see how? So see, right now I have disabled it, right? So I'll go to the command again and I'll say JavaScript. You can see my JavaScript is already disabled. Right now you can see it's enable JavaScript is saying because I have clicked on disable previously. So right now let me go ahead and refresh this particular page 2 or 3 times. I'll go to the element section. Okay, and you can see right now I have not edited anything. My username has an ID called YN. That's cool. Right now I'll not provide anything for my username. And for the cross name, let's say I'm going to provide some random value, and I'll do calculate, and there you go, you are able to move to the next page. So my validation didn't work because I have turned off the validation for my browser, right? So my browser is stopping the JavaScript to run. So this kind of logic will not work in production. So at that time your business logic will break. So we need something right here. So we need some kind of support right here to do the validation in the server side, and that's where the bin validation or the Spring MVC form validation will help us to do some magic in our server side code, so that if the things will be breaking right here, doesn't matter, in my Java code also I can handle it, right? So that's gonna save us, that's gonna save our business logic, that's gonna save us as a developer, and that's gonna save our company. Okay. Okay, so the takeaway that we get from all this session is it is pretty important to do server-side and the client-side validation at a time, right? So if our client-side validation fails, we can do something in our server-side. I mean, we can do the same validation in the server-side to save ourselves from a production bug. And for this, we have a great feature that Spring provides us is called bean validation. Okay, so right now you understood why the server-side validation is important, correct? And now you are kind of interested to do some server-side validation and you want to know that how to do the server-side validation. And obviously to do the server-side validation, we need some kind of API. And for that, Java provides us the Java Bean Validation API, and there are different versions available of that. The latest version of the Java Bean Validation API is the 2.0, or we also call it the JSR 380. So the different versions of the JSR which is available for the Bean Validation API are the JSR 303, the JSR 349, and the JSR 380. Now a obvious question that you will get that what do you mean by the JSR? Okay, so the JSR, first of all, just think the JSR just like a version. Okay, just say JSR 303 a older version, then the JSR 349, and then the JSR 380. Okay, so now let's understand what do you mean by a JSR. So as I said, JSR stands for Java Specification Request. Okay, so now let's imagine that you are a Java developer and you have kind of working in Java language for last few years, and you find that there are still some gap in this particular technology and you can actually improve it, right? So for that, you can file a JSR. You can convert your ideas or thought to a specification, what we call a JSR, and you can file that JSR in a community called JCP. So once you file a JSR, that JSR will be reviewed by the community people called JCP. So there is a community actually called JCP, Java Community Process. So first of all, to file a JSR, you have to be a member of a community called JCP, as I said. And once you be a member, you file a JSR. And then your JSR will be reviewed by your community people or the JCP community people, and then it will be go to the PMO. So PMO is another organization that controls the JCP. Okay, so PMO actually organized by the Oracle, and the PMO takes the responsibility for the JCP. So JCP is the team or the community that continuously work for the betterment or the improvement of the Java programming languages. So once you file the JSR and the review has completed and PMO also accepted your JSR, then actually whatever the thoughts that you have given, whatever the API you wanted to include in Java programming languages, those things will be released in the next version of the Java. So this is a very beautiful thing, isn't it? So anybody can share thoughts, anybody can share ideas, and for that, only the thing that you need to do, you need to be registered with the JCP team. So you can do that by visiting the jcp.org website, and once you be a member of that, you can share your ideas, thoughts to make the Java a better programming language, right? And JSR is nothing, it's just some kind of specification, okay? And once the specification is accepted, that's added to the next version of the Java. So right now we have kind of 900 plus JSRs are available, and for the Bean validation, we have 3 different JSR, as I said. JSR 303, JSR 349, and recently the JSR 380 has released in 2017 or something. So first of all, the Bean validation API, so the JSR 303, also called as the Bean validation 1.0 version, that came in with the Java EE6 version, and then the JSR 349 came in the Java EE7 version, and then recently JSR 380 has been released in 2017, and the Spring Framework 5.0 Plus series supports the JSR 380. So that's the latest one, and 380 is the JSR that we are going to use in our video right now. Okay, so right now, one last thing that I want to talk about the JSR is, if you are talking about the JSR 303, all the features of the JSR 303 are there in the JSR 349, and all the features of the JSR 349 are there in the JSR 380. So this is backward compatible, so no worries with that. So right now we are using the Spring 5.2 version. So the best suitable JSR right now we can use is the JSR 349 or the JSR 380, and obviously we are going to use the Hibernate Validator. So now you must be asking me why we need the Hibernate Validator. So guys, as I said, the JSRs are the specification. They are some kind of interfaces, right? So there are few companies who are actually giving the implementation to those JSRs, or they're giving the implementation to those specifications. So Hibernate validators are really popular. So there are different companies like Apache Vibhal, Hibernate, and the Spring Framework itself has their own implementation to the JSR 303, 349 or the 380. So in this course, we are going to use the Hibernate 6.0 series. Remember that if you are using the Hibernate 6.0 version, then make sure that your JDK that you are using, that is Java 8 plus, and you are using the Spring Framework 5.0 series, right? I think it supports 5.2 plus series probably, okay? But try with the 5.0 also, I'm not sure about it. Okay, right now this is all the story that I wanted to tell you. But this is the time to implement all this thing that we have learned right now, and let's understand how to do the server-side validation using the bin validation API or by using the Hibernate Validator 6.0 series, which is the implementation to the JSR 380 or the bin validation 2.0 API. Okay, so let's get into it. Okay, so right now let's do some server-side validation. Now my requirement is same, but instead of doing validation in my client side, I'm going to do it in my server-side code. Okay, so for an example, right now whatever we have done so far, if I'm not entering anything right here for the your name text field, I'm getting a validation error, and that's from my client end. So for a moment right now, let me remove it, and I'm going to use it later. So I'm going to go to my SRC main web app, and I'll go to webinf view. I'll go to my homepage.jsp. So here, this particular function, I'm not going to remove it. This is my JavaScript function, but where I'm actually calling this function, if I'm going to hit Command K here, then as you can see, I am calling this particular function in my onSubmit method. So for timing, let me remove this onSubmit method, and obviously I'm going to use it later. But for now, I'm going to remove my client side validation. Okay, command is to save everything. If I'll go back to my application, let's do OK here. Let me refresh this particular page. And right now, if I'll do calculate, I should be able to go to the next page because I have removed the validation. So let me go back and let me do some server-side validation for this particular field called your name. So to do the server-side validation, as I said, first of all, I need the Java validation API. So as I said you before, we have two different versions of Java Bean Validation API. One is 303, one is 349. Now let's use the latest one, which is JSR 349. And if I'm going to hit enter, as you can see, this JSR 349 belongs to the bean validation, and the beanvalidation.org is actually the site which is hosting this particular specification. For now, actually I'm not going to use the normal jar here, but I'm going to look for JSR 349 Maven dependency. Let's see what's going to come out of this. Okay, so Java X.validation 1.0.0, I think there is a latest version available for this. Yes, that is 2.0.1 final. Let me go for this particular version. And as you can see, the group ID is Java X.validation and the artifact ID is validation API. So let me copy this artifact and let me go back to my pom.xml, and I'm going to paste it right here. I'll go all the way to down. And I'm going to add one more dependency right here after my JSTL. I'm going to do a command Shift F to format everything. And this line, I am going to simply delete it because I don't like to see these things. I want to see my code clean and fine. Okay, so let me do Control S and is building my workspace, but to be in a Serverside, as I have updated my form, I'll go to the Maven and I am going to update my Maven project. Okay, it's done right now. So straight away, right now I'm going to close this particular file, and as I said, I'm going to do some server-side validation. I'm going to do some validation for your name text box. So if you remember, for this particular page, we are using a DTO, right? And actually we are doing the data binding with that DTO or with that bean. So let me go to that bean. Bean means simply a class. So as I said, first of all, who is loading our home page? I'll go to the LC app controller, and this is the method which is basically loading our home page. As I told you previously, it is mapped with a class request mapping. Okay, so right now before loading the home page, we are creating the user info DTO. Let me go to the user info DTO right now, and this username property right here is actually getting binded with the data what I'm entering right here. So the first thing here is that I'm going to use some validation. So what kind of validation I want to use right here? First of all, let me use a @not blank right here. So as you can see here, I'm getting not blank, not empty, not null. All these annotations are from the javax.validation.constraints. For now, I'm going to use not blank annotation just to make sure that this particular username will never be blank. If somebody is entering nothing right here in this text box and hitting calculate, he should get a validation error. And what kind of validation error he will get? Let me put a message for this. Okay, so I'll write control space and I'll click on message right here, and I'll write username. Let me give a star here. Let me say star username cannot be blank. Correct? Cool. So this is going to be my validation message which I want to be popped up right after the your name if the your name text box left blank during the time of the form submission. So I'll go back to my DTO. So right now, as I have attached a validation with this username, how can I trigger this validation? Okay, so whenever the user is going to fill in all this form, okay, and he will do calculate, the data binding will happen. Okay, and where actually the data binding is happening? So if I'll go to the LC app controller, so this one is loading my home page, and whenever I'm filling in all the data and whenever I'm hitting calculate, this particular method is actually helping us processing those data that I have entered here and moving us to the next page, which is result page. Right now here actually we are capturing the data from the URL, binding it with the user info DTO, okay, and sending those data to my result page, and my result page itself I'm accessing those data by using this model attribute. Right now here actually we are doing the data binding, right? Whatever the data we have entered, we are binding it with user info DTO. So once the data binding is done, I want my validation to get triggered, and to do that I'm going to use an annotation here called @valid, and as you can see the @valid annotation is coming from javax.validation. So I'll do enter and I'll give a space. I'm going to repeat it again. @valid annotation is going to help us to trigger the validation for this bean. This bean is user info DTO, right? So once the data binding is done, we're going to test our form field whether it is meeting the validation criteria or it is not meeting the validation criteria. So for now, let's say our validation criteria is username cannot be blank. Okay, and obviously if this username text box is blank, once the data binding done here, correct, if I'll go to the user info DTO, there will be nothing here inside the username property because the user has not entered anything, and as I said previously, we are not allowing that by putting this annotation. So if I'll go back, if the validation fails here, the @valid will validate everything, and whatever the validation result which is coming, I'm going to store that result using binding result property, right? So you can see binding result is a class available in org.spring framework.validation. So I'm going to hit that class and I'm going to, let's give it a reference, let's say result. So it's pretty straightforward. Valid will trigger the validation, okay, and whatever the validation result will come, okay, that result is going to be stored here. So for now, let's say I'm going to say here if there is any error, right? So I'll say result dot hasErrors, right? So this hasError method basically going to tell us that whether our form has any error or our form has submitted successfully. If the form has not submitted successfully, if this form has any error, then those error will be stored here inside the result. And I'm going to get what are the errors that I have right here. I will actually fetch the error later. For now, let me have a simple sys out here, and let me say here my form has errors, just to check whether my things are working fine or not, right? Now here two things you have to remember. Always remember that this @valid annotation should be there before model attribute, okay? Whatever the DTO you want to validate, before that DTO only you place the @valid annotation. And the next thing is this binding result should be after the DTO. So just after your DTO reference, you place the binding result, otherwise it won't work. Otherwise your bin validation won't happen properly. So you have to make sure that the binding result should come after the user info DTO initialization. Okay, cool. So right now we're just trying to see that if hasErrors, this is basically going to return us true or false. You can see it's a boolean is returning. If it is true, then this block will be executed and we're just printing something, my form has errors. Okay, so let's check whether it's working or not. Command S. Okay, so let me wait till my server reload my changes. Initializing dispatcher, and it's completed. Cool. So now let me go to my form. Let me refresh my form, and I will not enter anything for the username. I'll just leave it blank. And for the crush name, let me give some dummy value here and let me do calculate. And what is this? I'm able to move to the next page. But I am actually doing everything right. I have a not blank annotation right here before my DTO property. I've also triggered the validation by using the @valid annotation. And also I'm making sure that there is binding result just after my DTO, and my form has some error right now. So what I was expecting that as I have submitted this particular form without filling in the username, so it has some error. So if it has the error, my form has error should be there in my console. So why it is not there, and why my form has been submitted even without the validation fails? That's because I told you previously here, if you see in our form.xml, we have just given the specification. Okay, we have just given the dependency for Java X validation. This is just the specification. We also need to include the implementation for this specification, correct? So for this bin validation API, as I said, we have different types of providers. Like we have Hibernate Validator, we have Apache vVal, and also we have Spring Framework's own validation API. So right now, as I said, I'm going to use the one which is very popular, and that's the one is called Hibernate Validator. So I'm going to search here Hibernate Validator Maven dependency. Okay, so I got org.hibernate validator Maven repository. I'll go here and I'm going to go for this latest version of the Hibernate Validator, which is 6.1. I'm going to copy this and I'll go back to my POM, and right here I'm going to add one more dependency. Okay, let me format this and let me remove this line. I'll do Command S and I'll wait till my build is completed. Okay, cool. So things are working good right now. So one thing I'll tell you here is that this Hibernate 6.111 version is basically has all the features of bin validation 2.0.1 API, right? So we'll get all the latest feature right here, but make sure that to use the Hibernate 6.1.1, you should have at least Java 8 version, otherwise it won't run. Okay, cool. So right now I'll do nothing. My form has been updated. I'm going to close this. I'll just do a maven install for one time just to make sure there is no compilation error. So maven install, and I'll wait till my build is success. Cool, my build is success right now. Okay, so right now again I can hit my URL and can see whether my validation triggers this time, whether I will get my form has error in my console or not. So I'll go back to my Google Chrome, I'll go back to my home page, and I'll not fill in anything right here for my username, and I'll hit calculate. Cool, it will go to the next page because I have not written any kind of logic for that, but I'll go back here and see this sweet line right here. This is going to give you a lot of happiness. My form has errors. Right now, as I have submitted this particular form without giving anything right here for this box, so what is actually happening is my validation is getting triggered because of this @valid annotation, and whatever the validation errors that I have, I got that errors in my result reference, and right now whenever I'm checking my result has error or not, this particular function has error returns true, and I'm getting this in my console. Cool. So right now what I want, if my form has errors, right, I will not allow the user to go to the next page. If we'll do calculate, I will not allow him to go here. Instead, what I will do here, I will show him the home page again. I'll show him this particular page again. So to achieve that, I'll go back, and here in this particular method, inside my if clause, I'll do one thing. If my form has any error, return the home page and do not allow the user to go to the result page. So I'll do copy this, copy, paste here. Cool. So if there will be any validation error, show the user home page itself, and if this if block will not execute, that means I do not have any form validation error, then show the user result page. Let me do command S so that my changes will be deployed to my server, and I can test this application again to check whether my things are working as expected or not. Cool, so my changes has been deployed to my server, and also you can track this line here in the console, right? Hibernate Validator 6.1.1 is there. It's already there in your class path, so we have found it, and that's the log which confirms that we are actually using the Hibernate Validator, which is going to do the job for the validation, the bean validation, right? Cool, pretty nice. So I'll go back to my Google Chrome right now. I will refresh this particular page. Right now, I'm not going to fill in anything for my username. Let me give some random value for the crush name, and I'll hit calculate. And you can see something is happening. It is not allowing us to go to the next page right now because our validation is getting failed. Okay, and if I'll go back to the console, you can see there are so many times my form has error, my form has error. This particular line is getting printed to the console as many times I'm trying to submit the form. You want to check this out? Clear your console, go back here, calculate. Now you can see my form has errors, right? This particular line is getting printed, and after that I'm actually returning my home page, and that's why the user is seeing this page, not the next page, as the validation fails. Okay, so what actually the form error that I have configured with my DTO, that is username cannot be blank. Okay, so when my form validation fails here, I actually want to print that particular error to my console. So if my result has any kind of form errors, I can also fetch those errors from this result object, right? So what I can do here, if the result has errors, right, I can confirm that, okay, if this if blocks is getting executed, then my result has actually errors. So right now let me get rid of this line. So let me delete this line, and I'll say here that result, right, I'll just trying to log the errors if this result has any kind of errors right here. So I'll write result, add all error, get, okay, get all error. Let me try for get. Okay, get all errors. Let me use this. Right now I do not know what this particular method returns. This method returns a list of object errors. I'll do one thing. I'll select this. I'll hit command 1, and I can assign this to a local variable. And right now from this all errors, I'm going to fetch all the error one by one. I'll just use a for each loop here, and I can say object error temp, and all errors is actually containing the list, right? So I'm just writing a simple for each loop, and I'm going to print out the temp, and that's it, right? So right now let me see if my form has any errors. Those errors are getting printed to my consoles or not. So I'll go back again. Let me submit this particular form. I'll go back to my console. So if we'll observe the console here right now, we'll get a very detailed output. It is saying this user info has a field error for username property, and it has a rejected value, right? So if we go all the way to the end of this particular error message, you can see our error message that we have defined star username cannot be blank. Cool. So we are able to print our error message right here in the console, but actually this doesn't make sense, right? Actually we are just printing our error message in the console. The console is just meant for the developer. What I want here is that this particular message, username cannot be blank, this message I want to print it right here, okay, right here after the your name text box. If this box is left empty, we should be able to print that particular error message right here after your name, correct? So what I can do, I can go to my home page and I will do a very simple thing. I'll do Command Shift R to open and go to my home page. Then I'll do what? I'll go to my your name text box. This is my your name text box, and this is the p tag that I have written for this. And right now I will use form : errors. Okay, I'll use this tag right now. I'll end this tag right here just after this, and I can give the correct path, and the path is username itself, right? I'll do copy. This is my bean property name, and I'll paste this inside this path attribute, and I'll do Command S. So now let me go to my website, and I'll do what? I'll not enter your name. Let me enter some random crush name, and I'll do calculate, and boom, I get something right here. Username cannot be blank. Is this the exact error message that I've configured right here in my DTO? Yes, username cannot be blank. This particular error message right now I'm able to print next to my your name. So anytime if I'll not be filling in the data for the your name text box, I'll be getting this validation error message just right next to my your name text box. Okay, let's say right now I have given some data for this and I'll do calculate. I'll be able to go to the next page. Okay, cool, that's pretty nice. My server side validation is working really good. So now let's say I want to do some more validation right now. So what if the user is providing only one character, and he'll do calculate. Obviously he'll go to the next page because he has provided one character for this and it's not blank, correct? So I'll do another validation for this right now. There should be at least 2 or 3 characters should be entered to this particular field in order to submit this particular form successfully. And in order to do that, I'll go again to my user info DTO, and I can actually use another annotation right here. Let's say @mean, and I'll hit control space, and I'll use the one javax validation.constraints, and here I'll provide a minimum character. So I'll say value, and the value should be, let's say there should be at least 3 characters. Okay, and I can also provide a message here. Let's say message equal to, and I can say star, and I can say username or your name should have at least 3 characters. Okay, and this one also I'll change it to your name, not username. So I'll write your name. Okay, Command S to save. So for now, if I'll not fill in any details for my your name and crush name, and if I'll do calculate, I should be getting 2 different error messages. One is your name should have at least 3 characters and your name cannot be blank. You can also see this right here. We have 2 different error messages. Your name should have at least 3 characters. Your name cannot be blank. All these 2 error messages getting triggered during the time of the form submission if we are not filling the correct details. Right now, let's say I'm giving only 1 character right here in my your name field. So this message should go away, right? Your name cannot be blank, because I have given one character to this, but this particular error message should trigger because I have not given 3 characters. Let me do calculate and let me check that. Yes, one of the error messages gone away and we have only one right here. So my validation is really working good right now and I'm ready to go, and you are doing a good job. And I think right now we have got the foundation for the Bean validation and how actually it is working. But if you see the error message right here and the way our page is looking right now is just crap, right? You don't like it. I don't like it. We're going to change it. We're just going to make it pretty, okay? Don't worry, we're going to do that pretty soon. But one thing to feel good here is that our thing is working good. Our code is working good. And we are able to do some server-side validation, dude. We're doing really good. Congratulations. So now let's make our application pretty, okay? By adding some CSS to it. So if you actually see a real world form, you can always see this validation messages in red color, right? As it's pretty prominent to eyes. So what I can do here, actually I can go back to my STS, I can go back to my home page, and here for my home page, I actually want the backend code of my home page. And now I'll write a CSS class for my errors, right? So I can go back to my head tag. So right now I have a JavaScript function right here. Let it be right here because I'm going to use it later on, because my plan here to bring the front end and the back end validation together so that you guys can be aware about the validation and how we can add both server side and client side validation to our application so that our application performance will be improved, the quality of our application will be improved. So let it be there, this particular function. And right now I want to add some CSS to it. So I'll write style right here, and I'm going to give a line break just to separate the style and style, and I will write a CSS class. And again, if you do not know CSS, don't worry, you are coding in Java, and how come you will not understand a simple piece of CSS code? It's impossible. So to create a CSS class, I want to use a dot here, and I can give any name, but I want to give my class name as error. And I'm going to open and close the curly brace here, okay? So right now the color for my error, which is this thing, I want to turn this thing to red color. So I'll write here color, control space, and I'll write red semicolon, and I want to save this page, and I'm going to refresh this page, and nothing happens because I have not used this class anywhere. So let me copy this class and let me go where I'm actually using my form errors. So for my username, okay, for my username field, I have actually used a form errors right here. So I will give a CSS class to this. So I'll write CSS class and my class name is error, right? Command is to save. Right now, let me do one thing. Let me go back to the Google Chrome once again and let me refresh this page, and boom. Our error message right now in red color. So now if I remove this character from here, and again if I do calculate, you can see I have 2 error messages and both are in red color. But there is another problem right now. So if my username and cross name both are empty, as you can see there is nothing after username, there is nothing after cross name. If both are empty, then the position of this username text box is changing. So let me remove this username and cross name from the URL and let me do enter. See, right now it's pretty fine, but whenever there is some validation messages, things are looking pretty bad because I want these error messages to be appear right after the username, but the position of the username should not be changed, right? That should be fixed. So to make it happen and to make it good, what I can do here is I can go back to my CSS class that I've written, which is error. Let me go to the style and style tag. First of all, let me do a command shift F, okay? And after that, right now for this error class, I want to add few more property. Let's say I want to make this position fixed, okay? Command S. Now let me refresh this particular page. Cool. So we're getting these things right here, which is nice. But right now I want all this text to be aligned to left. So I'll go here and I can say align text. Sorry, I can say text align. Okay. And I'll say left, command S. And let me refresh this particular page. That's good. Right now, I want to have some space between this username and these error messages. So what I can do here, I can write something called marginal left. I can give a left margin, let's say 30 pixel. Okay, and that's it. I think this should be good. Good, right? So right now, I think we are pretty much good with the look and feel stuff of our website, and we are ready to go. So right now, what's next? So right now we have two validation messages. Your name should have at least 3 characters. Well, I didn't feel it good. You know what? I actually should have used a different annotation for the name field, for the your name field. So if I'll go back to my DTO, here I have used @mean annotation, right? So it doesn't feel good. Let me use @size annotation instead of @mean annotation. So the size annotation will have a minimum and a maximum property. So I can use a minimum property to give the minimum number of character, let's say 3, and maximum property to give the maximum number of character, let's say 15. And I also can provide a message to this, just like I have did before, just like I have done here. So I can copy this message and I can paste it right here. So for name, we should always use the size annotation, not the mean annotation. So the mean annotation is good for property like age or something, a cinema ticket number, okay, or car seat number, okay. That will be a proper place to use @mean annotation. Don't worry about it. I'm going to use this annotation whenever I'll be using it in a different form. But for now, let me delete it and I will go with the size annotation. Let's say the name field, the username field should have minimum 3 character and maximum 15 character. And if not, you will get this error message in your form itself, right? So let me do a command shift O because I have some unused import here. So let me hit command shift O, let me do command S. Let me go here, let me refresh this page. Okay, let me go to my root URL right now. So I can come from the scratch. I can provide my your name. Let's say I'm not providing anything, your name and cross name doing calculate. I'll be getting my validation messages. Your name should have at least 3 character. Let me modify it. Your name should have char between 3 to 15, correct? This is the value we have specified right here, 3 and 15. That's nice. I'll go here again. Let me refresh this particular page. So right now I'll fill in some random value. I'll fill in some random value here. I'll do calculate. I should be able to go to the next page. So what will happen if I will enter only 2 character? I'll do calculate. It is saying, okay, your name should have character between 3 and 15. So I'll give one more character right here, calculate. I'll be able to go to the next page. And what if I'll exceed the number of maximum count here, 15? I can type in some random value here and I'll do calculate. And you can see the validation triggers right here. So our validation is working good right now. So both Spring and Java are working together to make our validation successful. So now I want to bring in both front-end and the back-end validation together, and I'll explain you how it helps if the front-end validation fails or if the client-side validation fails, right? So I'll go back to my STS and I'll go to my homepage.jsp. Here I have a JavaScript function. Let me change this minimum length to 3 for now, because that's what we are doing in our server-side code also. In my Java code also I've specified 3 right here, the minimum size. So I'll do the same thing right here. Let's say 3. So the minimum character for the username field will be always 3 because this YN is belong to the username field and for the label your name. Right now again I'll put the on submit attribute to return and my method name. My method name is what? Validate username. Let me copy this. Now let me paste it right here. Command V and let me call this particular function. Command S to save. Okay, so now let me test this. Let me check first my front-end validation is getting triggered or not. So I'll refresh my page and I will not enter any kind of text right here and I'll do calculate. Well, my server-side validation is getting triggered first. I'm not expecting this because I want my client-side validation to trigger first. And why it didn't happen? Because of the typo, man. Because of the typo. Return. Let me do Command S again. Let me refresh this particular page, and right now let me do calculate, and there you go. First my JavaScript validation triggers. First my client side validation triggers. So before I move to the server side code, before I give so much stress to my server, first of all, I want to make sure that things will be shot out in my client side validation. And if something really bad is happening here, then my server side validation will trigger. Let's say I'm fulfilling the requirement right here and I'm doing calculate, I'm able to go to the next page. So if my criteria is not getting satisfied, first of all, my client side validation is getting triggered. So right now, let's say if somebody is trying to trick my application by doing some extracurricular activities right here, just like if we'll go to the console tab, if here I'm going to run a command and I'll say disable JavaScript. So right now my JavaScript has been disabled, and if I'm trying to do calculate right now, cool, my client side validation didn't work. But here we go, man, you cannot bypass the thing, right? I also have a server side check, and that's gonna catch you, you bad guy. And our validation is completely successful here. So that's how you're going to see a lot of validation, the front end and the back end together in your real-time project or in your real-time code. Okay, so that's good. Right now, I think you have a pretty good idea about the form validation, both the client side and the server side, but I'm going to remove the client side validation from here now because I want to specifically explain you the server side validations. Okay, so right now let me close this. Guys, if you remember our wireframe, right? Our home page wireframe, there is something which is still missing here. So this is the page that I'm trying to build, and I have already built the username and the crush name, but I have to build one more checkbox here which is going to be attached to the user term and condition. And we have to make sure that if the user is not ticking this checkbox, we will restrict him to use our application. And to do that, I'll again go back to my STS, and here in between my form and form, I'm going to introduce a checkbox. So I'll give another p tag here, p and p, and right here I have to include a checkbox. So I'll say form colon checkbox, then the path, right? So I'll go to my user info DTO. So right now here I'm going to introduce a new boolean field. It's going to be a boolean because it is going to hold the value true or false, yes or no, whether the user has been checked the term and condition box or not. So it's basically going to be a true or false. So I'll say private boolean, let me say term and condition. Okay, and right now I'm going to hit command 1, create getter and setter, and it will be after the set crush name, and I'll do OK. I will make sure that I have a getter and setter for this. Cool. So right now let me copy the property name, and I will go to my homepage.jsp. I'll provide the path here. That's nice. I'm going to give an ID to my checkbox. Let's say ID check. My ID name will be check. Right now let me create a label for this. So I'll write label, and the label for this checkbox is going to be I am agreeing that this is for fun. Okay, so that's nice. So right now let me go back to my home page, and if I refresh this, things are looking good. I'm getting a checkbox right here. Okay, so if the checkbox is checked, then I'll make sure that the user should be able to go to the next page. If it is not checked, then I will show the user some form validation error, and I'll tell him that, hey, you have to accept it. This is love calculator application. We are just building it for fun. You have to agree that this is fake, right? You cannot take it seriously, obviously. So right now, if you see, here if I'll go to my LC app controller, so let me do one thing. Whenever my data binding is happening, so I'll do one thing. I'll have another log here. I'll say sysout, and I'll do user info DTO. That's the object of my DTO object, and I'll do is term and condition. Okay, it will be better if I say it is term and condition accepted, but that's okay for now. Let's say is term and condition. I am going to refactor the name later, but right now let me check the value, what kind of value that I'm getting out of this, right? So to check that, again I'll go to my form. Let me fire my URL, and let's say I'm going to enter something here, and I'm checking this box, and if I'm doing calculate, cool, I'm going to the next page, but that doesn't matter. I want to see my console here, and it's saying true because I did check this particular box, right? And what about if I'll not check it? Okay, if I'll not check it and if I'll do calculate, what will happen? So let me clear my console here. Let me come here again and I'll do calculate. Okay, I'm moving to the next page because I do not have any validation for now, and you can see it is false right now. So that's pretty good. If you are checking it, we're getting true in the console, and if you're not checking it, we're getting false in the console. Okay, then it proves that in our user info DTO, whatever the value we are entering in our form, that particular checkbox value is getting binded to our term and condition boolean property. That's good. So what I can do here right now, I have to make sure the user has checked the checkbox in order to move to the next page. And if he is not checking it, then he is restricted to use our application. And to make it happen, I'm going to use another annotation here called assert true or assert false. I'm going to say here assert true. This checkbox should be true always if he or she want to use this application. So I'll write message here and I'll give a message. You have to agree to our term and condition, right? Or I'll say you have to agree to use our app. That's good. So right now assert2 will do its job, and in our LC app controller, the user data will be binded to the user info DTO, and if that checkbox has not been selected, we'll have an error message, and I will make sure that that error message will be shown in the home page itself. So I'll go to my home page and I'll do one thing here. After the label here, I can do one thing. So I want to have a form/error again, and here I'll give the path. So what is my path name? The path equal to this one, term and condition. This is our property name, right? Command V, Command S, and okay. So now let me go back to my application and let me check whether my validation is working. If I'm not checking this box, I'll do hit calculate, and okay, something is happening. I'm agreeing that this is for font. You have to agree to use our app. What kind of sentence is that? Okay, I'm going to refactor this error name, but the cool thing is we are not moving to the next page, right? So this thing is not red, probably because I have missed my CSS class here. So I'll write not here, just here I'll write CSS class, and it is error. So my CSS class name is error. That's good. Right now I'll do a control F. I'll go to my Google Chrome right now, and right now let's say I'm putting some value for your name, putting some value for crush name, and I'll do calculate. Cool, but still it's not in red color. Why? CSS class name is error. Oops, again a typo, man. Class name is error. What I have written here, error, Command S. I'm going to copy this name error, and I'm going to fix wherever I've written it. I've used it in my your name field. I'll do Command V. I have used it here again. I'm going to do Command V, Command S to save. I'll go back here. I'll refresh the page, and boom, we get it right here, correct? Now we get this in red color. Okay, so if I'm hitting this checkbox and if I'll do calculate, I'll be able to go to the next page. And if I'll not be hitting this checkbox, then I cannot use this app and I'll get this error message, correct? So things are looking good. So we have a validation in place for our username. We have a validation in place for our for this checkbox. So if I'll do calculate here, I have some validation message for this, I have some validation message for this. I will make sure the same validation message for the cross name as well. So what I can do here, I can go to my user info DTO, I'll copy these two messages, okay, not blank, the cross name also will not be blank, and also the same criteria for the cross name, it should be between 3 and 15 character, and for the term and condition, you have to agree to user up. Let's say agree to user up, okay, command S. Okay, so one more thing, I can edit this message. This is the cross name field, right? So I can say cross name cannot be blank, and I can also say cross name should have character between 3 to 15. And I will also go to my homepage.jsp, and I will make sure that this cross name form input also bind to the error, right? So I will copy this form error, command C, I'll do command V here, and I'll change the path to cross name, and I'll apply the CSS class to error. I'll do command S to save. Now I will go to my Google Chrome and let me hit the homepage URL for now. And let's say I'm not providing any details here. I'll do calculate. I have all the validation triggers. Okay, so let me fill this in. Let me fill this in. I'm checking this box. Calculate. Well, it's working good. Okay, what if I'm only going to remove this cross name? Calculate. Only I'll get the validation for the cross name. Okay, so things are working pretty good right now. So I'll encourage you to practice this by yourself so that we can do some more advanced thing in the next video. But for now, go ahead, use the form errors in your home page. Just try to use all these annotations. These 3 annotations we have done right here, right? Just try to practice them, and I will get back with some more annotation in the coming videos, and also we'll have a lot of fun doing it. Because still the amount of knowledge that we have, still I consider ourselves as a very beginner. We will right now play with all these annotations, and later on what we will do, we will create our own annotations just like size. So size is the annotation, right? So how they have created this annotation? Can we create our own annotation? So all these things coming up in the next video. So in the next video, we'll be doing a lot of advanced thing, and that will help you pretty much in your real-time project. So play with it. Be comfortable and come back to the next lecture with full preparation. Okay guys, thank you very much for watching this tutorial. If you have any doubt, any query, please write me a mail to seleniumexpress@gmail.com, or for support, you can join my support group in my Facebook page called Selenium Express-support. You can get the link in the description, and also if you have any queries, any question, don't forget to comment a question in the comment box as well. I'm going to definitely answer you out. And also, I'm new to Instagram right now. If you want, you can follow me on Instagram. My Instagram ID is selenium_express. Okay, that's it for this tutorial. See you in the next video. Till then, bye bye, happy coding, and take care.